Alright, welcome back to the channel everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to install a OEM oil pressure sending unit. But before I do, I need to explain to you what the situation is, both here and on the car. Basically, like most early year first generation NSXs, the oil pressure gauge on the cluster doesn't show correct oil pressure. It might show good oil pressure like when at first startup, cold startup on an idle, but then eventually just drops down. And I know it's not bad oil pressure, otherwise my engine would have blown up by now. However, I installed a SOS oil pressure sending unit. I have a video for that, which I can link in the description. And there's still no difference in the oil pressure on the gauge. I do have a new OEM oil pressure gauge for the cluster that I plan to install after this. But I'm hoping the problem is either the sending unit or the gauge, because the SOS didn't fix it, didn't make it worse, didn't change it at all. So what I'm going to do is, and this is why my old OEM sending unit is just slightly disassembled, why the plug is gone and why the cover is gone, because that's on the SOS unit. So in my case, it might be different than what you're working with, because I'm going to have to disassemble my old OEM one to get this piece off and put it on the brand new one. I'm not sure, I don't remember if this was either discontinued or expensive. So that's why I didn't buy it, but I'm just going to reuse this one. All I need is 2 O-rings and that piece. So here's the part number, at least for my model year, 1991, for the sending unit. And O-ring, I bought 2 O-rings because it's always good to have an extra, a spare. This black O-ring part number is for this guy right here. And this red O-ring, here's a part number, is for in between these 2 pieces, since I am going to have to take this bottom block off and put it on that one. You only need 1 O-ring of each, but again, I bought 2 just in case I screw up. I don't want my car to be down because I screwed up and broke an O-ring. And then that's the bracket that I took off during the SOS sending unit install that holds this plug. So I'm going to show you guys on this video how to remove this guy, put that on there. This one it's really easy. This is 16 foot-pounds to the base, and then the bolts are also 16 foot-pounds. So I'll put this in my vise, remove it. This is a 22 millimeter. And then tighten it on. I'm not going to be able to torque it to 16 actually, because I do have a crow's foot attachment, but it's a kind of closed end, like a flare nut wrench style. So I would not be able to remove it if I got it on there. So I need like an open style crescent wrench crow's foot. So 16 foot-pounds is not a lot. I'm just going to crank it on. But I'll show you all that and how to install it all in this video. I'm not going to show how to remove the OEM unit, because that's in my SOS sending unit install video. So if you need to see how to remove it, go to that video. Again, I'll link it in the description. This is just going to be how to install it, because I'm going to be removing the SOS unit, which is different. So let's get into it. All right, so I'm going to put this guy in here in my clamp. Grab my 22 millimeter, and lefty loosey is this way. All right, that was pretty easy. You can see the red O-ring and peeking in there. So I'm going to go ahead and clean this up and discard this one. Clean this up, replace the O-rings, and then install it. Okay, I have the block clean now. I shot it up with brake cleaner, and so it's nice and clean. All the surfaces are good. And so we have the 2 new O-rings here. One thing I want to note is that the instructions don't say specifically to grease these O-rings. It says to grease in a different section, the O-rings, on different parts of the engine, but in general, what I'm going to do is I'm going to very, very, very lightly grease the red O-ring. I'm not going to do the black one. And why I'm doing that is because the black one is not having any twisting motion on the O-ring. And let me explain that in a second. The red one, even though it does sit in this recessed area, the red one, at least when it's brand new, it still does stick up above the top layer of this aluminum. And so when you're going to screw this in, there's going to be a slight little bit of friction in turning this. So in general, when that happens, when you have O-rings where you're exerting a twisting motion, a rotating motion on the O-ring, and it's dry, that gives it a chance to tear the O-ring, because the metal surfaces that are rubbing against the O-ring and turning don't allow to the metal surface to slide over the O-ring unless there's a little bit of lubricant. So in this case, it's not going to be too much because there's kind of a large recess, like I said. But I'm going to do a very, very, very light coating of oil on the top surface. And again, on this black one, you will not have to do that because there's no twisting motion. This is just going to install flat on the block and bolt in directly straight on. There's no turning motion on this O-ring. So I'm going to grab a little bit of oil, tiny, tiny, tiny little bit of oil, like that. I'm going to just kind of run it along the top like that. That's it. Just the tiniest bit of lubricant on there. And then I'm going to turn it on. And of course you want to make sure that it doesn't fall out while you're turning this on. So even though the angle sucks for you guys, I'm going to prioritize not screwing it up for this video on my car. Turn this on. So now it's on there. I'm going to put it in my vise and crank it down. It's metal on metal right now. And so again, I don't think the oil is necessary too much, but I'm going to do my best to get it to what I think 16 pounds is. It's not very tight, but again, I can't put a crow's foot on there because my crow's foot are enclosed a little bit, so I wouldn't be able to remove it. So I'm going to do that off camera. I'm just going to crank it down and then come back to you guys. Okay, so I cranked it down. Again, you should know this if you're doing this kind of job in the car, but righty-tighty is going to be from the perspective of looking down. So clockwise, looking down on it. Okay, so with this O-ring in place, this one stays in place pretty good since it has these little notches sticking out. You're just going to want to go ahead and grab the OEM bolts, which are still in the car in my case, install it, install this bracket back on, and these bolts are also going to be torqued down to 16. So I'm going to jump there. Again, I'm not going to show you how to remove your OEM one. That's in my other video because I currently have the SOS one installed right now. So we're going to jump to basically the bare block, and I'm going to be installing this right now. All right, everyone. So we're installing it right now. You can see right there in the center of the frame, right there, the sending unit is removed. You're going to want to clean up that surface right there and make sure that there's no debris in there. And then we're going to go ahead, make sure again your O-ring is on the new unit and it's secure in there. And then you're going to install it using the 2 bolts right here at 16 foot-pounds. And so importantly, I don't know if this was in my SOS sending unit install, but remove the radiator tank. It's sealed right here. The only opening is going to be this right here. So as long as that is on the top side, you remove the bolts on these 2 bolts and the one on the firewall, and you can rotate it out of the way. I do have a strap holding it out of the way. I did undo I think that's a VTEC solenoid plug and some of these other plugs to get out of the way because I am reaching my hand directly down that way. Using a short stubby 12 millimeter, and I used an offset 12 millimeter at one point as well, and I have a long extension for tightening the bolt on later with the 12 millimeter flex. So I'm going to install this before I leak too much oil all over the place. Of course, you have to have rags underneath to catch all this oil, but you're going to just go ahead and fish this in. I'm not going to be able to show you too much, but I'll see what I can show you. going to go ahead and try to get this bolt started. Reach in here with the last bolt. It helps have smaller hands, but you can use a magnet, I think is what I used in the previous video. Okay, both of them are snugged in there. I'm going to give it a quick clean wipe on the bottom side before I start trying to torque them in there. Going to grab my offset 12, just give it a little bit of a tighten. Now I'm going to grab my long extension. Snug them up. I don't think I'm going to be able to get the proper torque on there with a wobble extension, so I'm going to just go ahead and tighten these up as tight as I can with probably a long 12 wrench if I can. So I have here a long 12 straight, and so I'm going to see if I can get this in here. I need to move my light. Switching to my offset. I ended up using a combination of 12mm offset along with my long extension with the wobble at the end. The wobble works best as straight as, if you can get it on as straight as possible with the wobble not at a sharp, angle. So the bottom one, I never used the wobble too much. Top one, I did use the wobble a lot to tighten it as much as I could. I could not get the short, stubby 12mm on there with the top of that sending unit in the way because it bulges out too much. I used it to remove the SOS block because the mushroom is relocated. The top of that thing is relocated. But that's why just another good excuse to get more tools. You want to have as best of an arsenal as you can to tackle jobs like this. So again, extension, 2 long extensions this is a special wobble where the socket is built into it. If you have the kind where it's just the extension, you have to put a socket on the end, that adds more length onto this. So these are really nice. I think this is a Craftsman. But anyway, I use this for this SOS one. I tried to use this one, but this is kind of hard to get a little bit of leverage on. This did fit, but it was hard to tighten down. This one was key, 12mm offset, especially with the 12 point, because it allowed more finer increments to move it. So that's what I used for this one. I don't think I got this one on too much. I used it like once. There's not too much room to move around in there, but I think that will do it for that part. I just need to plug in the sending unit now and make sure I plug in like the stuff that I unplugged, the VTEC solenoid, things like that. Again, I just hand torqued it. 16 is not a lot. Do not strip this. If you're doing this, if you're not comfortable judging around 16 by yourself, do not attempt this by yourself because you can really do some damage. You do not want to strip that threading out of the block because then you're really screwed and you're going to be shooting oil everywhere. Do not do that. So take it to a professional if you're not comfortable, or if you do have a torque wrench that can fit in there, that'd be great. Ideally, if you wanted to get, my DIYs are kind of trying to do it the easy way for people. If you did really want to get serious, you did want to torque this thing down, you're going to have to go underneath the car and remove the subframe brace and possibly the starter in order to get kind of a clear shot at that area. in order to maybe get a torque wrench. I'm not guaranteeing you can get a torque wrench on there from the bottom, but that's going to be your best chance with the engine in the car and all this junk in the way. So I think I'm probably going to cut it off there because the rest is super easy. Just install that little bracket that I took off earlier, and I'll try to show you a video if I can of the final setup. But I'm going to install a bracket, install the plugs, plug everything back in, and then I'll be done. Okay, as for the bracket, you can see it next to the left of that green VTEC solenoid plug that's unplugged. There's a bracket there that I just installed. It's pointing downwards, and so that's the way you're going to need to install it to get the plugs on. So I'm going to do that next. All right, so I'm going to do my best to show you how to do this. It's not in focus. There you go. So I plugged the two plugs in. I'm going to slide this piece, the plug downwards. And pull up. You heard it click, so now it's in place right there. Don't forget to remove your rags and towels, and then install the coolant reservoir back in, and you're done. All right, I got everything installed. A couple of notes. First off, the HCE service mat was clutch in this job. Usually I have to lay out like a moving blanket or my silicone rubber tool trays, but I didn't have to do any of that. Just gonna have to give this thing a little bit of wipe down afterwards, not a big deal. Second of all, I believe it's one of the NSX gurus online that stated that you should only install one of these bolts on this side because the reservoir is plastic and it kind of, I can't remember the reason, I think because it moves or it expands, that's one of the reasons, one of the things that can help the longevity of your reservoir from detaching, because it's two pieces, top and bottom, from leaking. So it'll deter it from leaking. So I do have it mounted on the other side right there and only right there, and it's plenty secure. So make sure that this is pointing straight down. So I think that's it. Very relatively straightforward install. Helps to have smaller hands and the right tools, of course. But otherwise, if you have any questions, let me know. I'm gonna go ahead and test the oil pressure driving around and see if it fixed it. If not, I'm going to install the oil pressure gauge and hopefully that fixes it. But I'm gonna know either way if the oil pressure sending unit fixed my problem or not. Again, it's a big, or not again, but I haven't mentioned this, but there's a lot of hubbub online about the SOS unit not being good. I didn't have any issues. Again, my gauge was not functioning before and after the SOS unit. So some people, for some reason, don't like the SOS unit. I didn't have any issues. I'm gonna see if a new OEM unit does fix it though, and then maybe I will have issues with the SOS unit if the new OEM unit does fix it, where the SOS unit did not. So check back at the end of this video to find out what the solution is. All right, so don't forget to take the car for a test drive, and also to, more importantly, before you go on a test drive, make sure there's no leaks. So I have a mirror and a flashlight that I use to look at the bottom of the solenoid to tell if there's a leak. And so here's my oil pressure at idle right now. It's been idling for about 10 minutes, and I'm gonna drive it around. This is normal. If I drive it around and then it drops down to zero when I come to a stop, then that's what it's been doing this whole time, and then I'm gonna try to do the gauge after that. But I need to go drive it around now and see if the pressure drops down to zero again. All right, so far so good. I just went out driving for just down the street so far, and pressure is holding where it normally would be zero at idle right now. I'm stopped at a light, so looks good. I think that fixed it. So that doesn't speak well for the SOS unit. All right, so far so good. I'm pulled over on the side of the road periodically checking there's no leaks. Definitely you don't want any kind of oil leaks in your engine bay, starting any fires, or just plain, you know, dropping out all your oil so your oil starves. But you can see here that my oil pressure is holding steady at about 1.5 to 2, which I believe is normal at idle, whereas before I told you that the problem was it was dropping down to 0 at idle after it's warmed up. So I think that shows that the OEM sending unit fixed the problem, and doesn't really speak well for the SOS unit, which a lot of people did say is no good. So I guess in my case it wasn't working either. Worked just as good as the failed OEM unit that I had before. So I'm not sure that I would recommend that one. I usually recommend SOS for a lot of things, but in this case kind of fell off the mark. So recommend OEM oil sending unit if you guys need a replacement, and just check out my video for the install. Alright, so I think that'll do it. Thanks for watching.